One of the most useful skills a GM can have is to be good at winging it, improvising and making details up on the spot when, for whatever reasons, your players go to places you didn't plan for or do unexpected things. Improving your improvisational skills as a DM can help immerse your players in your world. But to do that, you, the DM, must also become immersed in your world. Let's talk about that. Welcome to Indeterminate Infinities, where we discuss multifarious aspects of the art of game mastering. My name is Gene. In my high school production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I was cast as the character of Martini, played by Danny DeVito in the film. But as the rehearsals progressed, the script was abridged to remove all cuss words, the gambling scene, any reference to cigarettes or booze, and so forth, which eliminated all of my character's best lines. Anyway, now I am a professional writer and information architect, and I've been DMing for 49 years. The term winging it, which is slang for improvising without preparation, originated in the late 1800s as a theater term for those situations where an actor, usually acting like an understudy when one or more other actors are unable to perform, didn't have his or her lines memorized, but instead quickly reviewed the script before each scene while waiting in the wings. The wings being the spaces just off stage. And though the term has come to mean virtually any situation in which one feels compelled to improvise, understanding where the phrase originally came from points us to one way to become better at improvising as a GM. In an earlier video, I explained my personal philosophy that the first step in learning to improvise as a GM is to be curious. When a player wants to do something you didn't plan for, ask leading questions to understand what they are trying to accomplish and the thinking involved in their decision to try this thing. I don't want to repeat all of that here. You can watch that video if you're interested, link below. But one concept that I touched on a few times was engagement with your world. Another way that people describe that concept is immersion. Everybody who gives advice to DMs talks about the importance of helping your players become immersed in your world. But what doesn't get discussed nearly as often as it should, because it is just as important as player immersion, is DM immersion. There are many, dare I say, infinitely many, tasks which you, the DM, are expected to undertake that are easier to do the more deeply you are immersed in your fictional world. One thing I like to do during a prep for an upcoming game session I'm going to run is to take a few minutes, no more than 5, to write a few evocative sentences about a location I expect my players to go to in the session or about an encounter that they will have. This isn't a detailed description, and it isn't about what I think will happen. I'm trying to capture the emotional texture of the scene that I imagine my players may be involved in. My results tend to be more atmospheric than strict enumeration of everything the players can see, in part because it is too easy, and I do this just as often as anyone, to overload your players by giving them too many details. So when I do this, I'm not thinking of an inventory of things for the players to interact with. I'm trying to capture the mood of how I see this part of the adventure. I'm trying to let myself be a player in the world and just experience it. For example, the road crests the hill on this crisp, bright autumn afternoon. On each side of the road are fields full of tall, tawny stalks of grain, undulating under the influence of fickle breezes. Those same breezes carry a musky scent of straw and chaff and earth. In several of the fields, you see the figures of scarecrows and immediately perceive the incongruity of a single crow perched on the shoulder of the nearest scarecrow, taking shelter from the sun, it seems, under the scarecrow's battered straw hat. Something startles the bird, and it takes flight, revealing distinctive white shoulders and wingtips, contrasting against the iridescent black of the rest of its feathers. It is a magpie, not a crow. You feel a sudden chill down your spine. A single magpie, as everyone knows, is an omen of bad luck. Now, that might be too long to read aloud to your players in one lump. The reason I write something like that is to help me get in the mood. I write it during my prep, and I will likely pull some phrases from it when I describe what my players see as they travel that road. but the main purpose of it is to act as a warm-up exercise. Before a musical performance, a musician will play some scales or a few phrases from one of the pieces of music they are going to play. A singer will sing some scales and do some breathing exercises, right? As a GM, when I sit down behind my DM screen and arrange my notes and dice and other tools, and while the players are chatting and catching up, I like to take a deep breath and then silently read that kind of mood piece to myself. I imagine myself as a player character starting that day's adventure. I give myself a few moments to just internalize the fictional world in which my players, in collaboration with each other and me, will tell today's story. When writing this sort of evocative exercise, I try to focus on a single location or encounter. I try to limit myself to less than 10 sentences, and I try to include at least 3 of the following items: an image, a sound, a smell, and a feeling. Your writing style may not be that flowery, and to tell the truth, mine isn't either. Any member of my writing critique group or any of my past collaborators will tell you that my first drafts consist of almost nothing but dialogue with no description. Description and scene setting is not where my brain goes first. It is only while rewriting that I add description and try to craft language that sets the mood or paints a scene. I started doing exercises like this because the kind of evocative descriptions that fully immerse players or readers in the moment don't come naturally to me. Even now, many decades after selling my first fiction story, after decades of writing stories, editing other people's stories, publishing an illustrated literary sci-fi zine, description remains my weakness. During prep, look at your maps and your notes. This applies to running a module as well, by the way. And take a few minutes to write something evocative about the room your players were in when you stopped the last session, or what they're going to find behind that door they reached at the end of last session, or an encounter they're likely to have in the coming session. Like that time in high school, after I put in all that work and time memorizing and practicing dialogue that was cut from the performance, it wasn't wasted time. It isn't wasted time to think about the fictional world of the adventure. Imagine what it would be like to live in that world so that you can immerse yourself in it. This exercise will give you images and sense-based phrases that will start to become second nature as you run games. Reading them to yourself just before a session is like that original meaning of winging it I talked about earlier. You're studying the shape and texture and mood of part of your world, immersing yourself in part of the tale to come before stepping out on stage to usher your players into their next adventure. And that's where we'll leave it today. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up button and or consider sharing it. Click subscribe to be notified when new videos are uploaded. If you have any thoughts on this topic, leave them in the comments below. Until next time, keep dreaming.